My ex-wife wasn't just trying to ruin my life. She gambled everything, including her own, framing me as an abuser. She played that card damn well, but what she didn't expect was that I recorded every one of her filthy confessions, and that was just the first step toward her complete downfall. Alright, let me tell you how my life turned into a complete mess. My name is Alex, I'm 29, and honestly, there was a time when I thought I had everything under control. I lived with my wife, was building a career, just going about my business like any normal person. But then, there was one tiny detail. Her name is Kelly, she's 27, and as it turns out, she's a master manipulator. It's one of those cases where you think you've married a princess, only to find out she's a freaking witch. So, we got divorced about a year ago. But trust me, it wasn't just a divorce. No, she turned it into a circus. Back then, I had no idea that all her crying and speeches about how she couldn't live without me were complete nonsense. She had already found herself some rich fool while I was busting my ass at 3 jobs to cover her debts. And like the last fool, I thought we were about to fix things, but all I got was divorce papers and a stinking box of my stuff dumped on the porch. But the real fun began afterward. You think divorce is the end? Ha, no way. She decided that taking my money and kicking me out of the house was just the beginning. I started noticing that people were looking at me differently, and not in the good sense, like oh look at that cool guy, divorced and free. No, I could see that they were kind of scared of me. And some even stopped saying hello. I didn't figure out what was going on until I realized my ex had started spreading rumors. Oh, Alex is so aggressive. He almost hit me. I was scared for my life. Yeah, can you believe it? She actually started saying I was abusive, just like that, out of nowhere. At first I thought it was just gossip that would die down, but no. People started believing her. Of course, everyone loves to sympathize with victims, and just like that, in a couple of weeks, I went from being a normal guy to some potential psycho in the eyes of my entire social circle. And then I realized she was going all in. Alimony, splitting the property, none of that was enough for her. Kelly wanted to destroy me completely. As a person, she wanted me to be left with nothing. No job, no friends, no reputation. And you know what? She almost succeeded. But that turned out to be just the beginning of the hell I was about to go through. When you think things can't get any worse, life always finds a way to kick you even harder. About a month after those disgusting rumors started spreading, I get a message from Kelly. Can you believe it? This snake decided that we could talk like adults and settle everything peacefully. You can probably already guess that this was a trap, but back then, being the naive idiot that I was, I thought, oh, maybe she's finally come to her senses and wants to end things on a good note. Haha, good try, Alex. Kelly suggested we meet at our old favorite cafe. Of course, that seemed strange, but honestly, I was so tired of all this crap that I agreed. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? We'll talk, and maybe we'll finally put this whole thing behind us. I already felt like a man drowning in quicksand, and any branch to grab onto seemed like salvation. I show up at the cafe, and guess what? Kelly is sitting there with a face like we're old friends who just haven't seen each other in a few months. She's smiling, chatting about how hard things have been for her since the divorce, and how she wants to maintain a civil relationship because we need to keep things normal between us. You get it, the usual bullshit. I sat there, nodding, listening to her, but in my head, the only thought was, what is she up to? But when she said she still had some of my stuff at her place and suggested I swing by to pick it up, like the fool that I was, I agreed. Something in her voice made me believe that she genuinely wanted to clear up this mess and let me go in peace. I was, of course, tense, but I decided to take the risk. We went back to her place. I walk in and everything seems normal, the same mess. Her beloved cats running around the apartment. She started nervously pacing around the room, muttering something about how she wanted both of us to move on, and then everything changed in an instant. In one moment, her face twisted into something unrecognizable. She started screaming like a madwoman, saying I ruined her life, that I was a terrible person. I stood there frozen, not even understanding what was happening. And then, suddenly, she grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter and started waving it in front of me. I nearly lost it right there. Then she suddenly stopped, dropped the knife, and started screaming. Not just yelling, but shrieking as if I had attacked her. Yeah, man. It was the most perfectly executed setup in history. She knew that if someone heard her screaming, they would immediately believe that I tried to kill her. And you know what? Her plan worked 100%. Can you imagine my state of mind? I'm standing there in shock in the middle of her apartment, and this psychopath is screaming like I really did something to her. I froze, my brain just shut down, and Kelly continued her performance, like an actress gunning for an Oscar. Her face showed a mix of fear and hatred, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she screamed, "You tried to kill me!" It took me a moment to realize what was happening when she grabbed the phone and dialed 911, and that's when I realized I was in the deepest shit imaginable. She was sobbing on the phone with the police saying I attacked her with a knife, that she barely escaped. And yeah, it was so absurd that under any other circumstances I would have laughed. But newsflash, in moments like that, there's no room for laughing. I literally felt cold sweat dripping down my back. She finished the call, looking at me with such a triumphant smile it sent chills down my spine. About 15 minutes later, the cops were banging on the door. Yeah, dude, The cops. They barged into her apartment like I was a terrorist, not some poor sucker who just got played. They immediately cuffed me, twisted my arms, and dragged me outside. And of course, Kelly stood at the door with her wounds and cuts, which she had obviously inflicted on herself to make the whole thing look convincing. "He tried to kill me," she screamed, rushing towards the officers like she was starring in some damn thriller. And you know what? Everyone believed her. Of course they did. She's the crying victim with injuries, and I'm the guy they just slammed face down into the floor. The picture was clear as day. Here's the abuser, and here's his victim. And who cares that, in reality, I had just been standing there, clueless about what the hell was going on. They threw me into the back of the car, and on the way to the station, it finally hit me that I was in some twisted nightmare. The only things that felt real were the cuffs on my wrists and the cold metal of the police car seats. It didn't matter that I hadn't touched anything. It didn't matter that I didn't even get a chance to explain that this was all a lie. The only thing I heard was one of the officers coldly saying to me, "You know, assault is a serious charge, man." And that's how I ended up in jail. Yeah, jail, can you believe it? When you're innocent but sitting in that filthy, stinking cell, all you can do is rot and wait for someone to bail you out. That night, I spent hours thinking, what the hell just happened? I replayed the moment she grabbed the knife, the moment she started screaming, over and over in my head, and the only conclusion I could come to was that Kelly had completely lost her mind. But you know what's the funniest part? The next day, after I was released on bail, I realized that what I had seen was just the tip of the iceberg. Kelly took this whole messed up circus way further than I could have ever imagined. She posted pictures of her cuts online, giving detailed accounts of how I supposedly beat her up and how she barely survived. Seriously, dude. This whole nonsense spread like wildfire among our mutual friends and acquaintances. People I'd known for years started looking at me like I was a monster. They all believed her. Because of course, women don't lie, especially about violence. So yeah, that's how I, Alex, who just wanted to leave all this crappy divorce business in the past, became a social outcast and a criminal in the eyes of everyone I knew. The next morning, when I finally got out on bail, I realized my bad day was only just beginning. Imagine stepping out of the station into total chaos. I was already prepared for some friends to turn their backs on me, but I never thought it would get this serious. Social media had literally blown up. Kelly posted all these staged photos of her injuries and told her followers she had barely survived. The comments were unbelievable. "We always knew something was off with Alex," or "Poor Kelly, stay strong, we're with you." Yeah, man, all those friends who used to hang out at our place, chat, drink beer, and play cards, were now happily throwing me under the bus. I hadn't even made it home yet when I started getting threats. One message read, "If I had known you were such a bastard earlier, I'd have killed you already." And one of our mutual friends even suggested we settle this like men. Honestly, I was on the verge of telling everyone to go to hell, giving up on everything, and moving far away, but one thought kept me going. I wasn't going to let that witch destroy me, so I started thinking about how I could turn the tables in my favor. I knew her story was total crap, and if I could prove that, I had a chance to clear my name. The problem was, no one believed my words. I needed evidence, and then it hit me. Kelly's house had surveillance cameras. Sure, she could have turned off her own cameras, which apparently she did, but the neighbors' cameras, they had to be working. The next day, I headed to Kelly's neighbors. Imagine my face. After another shot of caffeine and a heavy dose of anxiety, knocking on their door. They looked a bit uneasy when they saw me and clearly knew what was going on. I had to lie, telling them I just wanted the footage to figure out what really happened. And yeah, I didn't expect them to welcome me with open arms. But luckily, they weren't as crazy as everyone else, and agreed to show me the recordings from their cameras. And there it was, the moment of truth. I sat in their living room, watching the screen. There I was, walking into Kelly's house with absolutely empty hands and the expression of someone about to sign a peace treaty. And an hour later, I walked out the same way, without a scratch, and looking completely confused. No violence, no screaming, no fight. That was it. I was one step closer to getting justice. But that video alone wasn't going to do all the work for me. I needed more. I needed to catch Kelly in her own web of lies, make her lay all her cards on the table, and I already knew how to do it. Okay, so now I had the video showing me calmly walking in and out of her house with no signs of violence or hysteria. It was something. But I knew one video wouldn't be enough. People who had already painted this picture of a bloody massacre in their heads wouldn't believe a simple surveillance tape. They needed something bigger, something that would put a definitive end to her lies. That's when I decided I needed to corner her and get her to spill everything herself. Knowing Keely and her love for drama, I was almost certain that if I pushed her the right way, she'd reveal all her dirty secrets. And so, I started crafting a plan. I needed to meet her again, but this time, everything had to go according to my rules. I texted her, saying I wanted to talk and was ready to settle if she dropped all the charges. And yeah, it sounded like I was giving up, but in reality, I was just setting the trap. Kelly, of course, fell for it. She probably thought I was on the verge of breaking and would agree to anything just to make it all stop. So, we arranged to meet at the same cafe where it all began. This time, I was fully prepared. I brought my phone with the recorder on, just in case. You know, there was no way I was going to let her walk away clean again. She showed up with that same smug smile as before. I could already tell she thought she had me beaten, like I was going to pour out apologies and pay for all her suffering. We sat down, and I started carefully guiding the conversation according to my script. First, I played weak, admitting that, yeah, she was right. I hadn't been the best husband. Ha, sure. And that I wanted to close this chapter and move on. Her eyes lit up. She was clearly expecting me to beg for forgiveness any minute. Then I threw in the bait. You know, I even understand why you did what you did. You had to go to extremes, and that's when I saw her relax. She felt completely safe, thinking she'd already won. And then, dude, the moment I had been waiting for happened. She started boasting. Yeah, you heard that right. Boasting. You should have known you wouldn't have listened any other way, she began. And then, with this cold tone that sent shivers down my spine, she continued. I had to stage that attack. You wouldn't have agreed with me otherwise. You have no idea how hard it is for a woman in these situations. Women have to play by their own rules because no one believes them. She said this, with the same expression as if she were discussing chess strategies. Man, you can't imagine how much I wanted to laugh in her face. She actually thought I would agree with this insane nonsense. In my mind, I was already celebrating my victory. All this time, my phone had been recording every word she said, every filthy confession. This was my golden ticket. Her pride and overconfidence were working in my favor. Kelly had no idea that this meeting would mark the beginning of her downfall. When I heard her admit that she cut herself and cried for the cameras, I knew for sure that things were not going to go the way she had planned. Listen, when I walked out of that cafe, I felt like I had just won the lottery. Not a small prize, but the freaking jackpot. I had her confession in which Kelly, the so-called poor victim, openly bragged about how she masterfully framed me. And now, I had a plan to make sure not only would she regret this, but she would also burn with shame in front of everyone who had naively believed her lies. I went home and immediately started editing the recording. You know what's the craziest part? I didn't even have to edit anything. Her voice, her disgusting, smug tone, every word was so clear and perfect that it was the ultimate expose. It was like she was giving an interview titled, How I Framed My Ex and Got Away with It. I didn't need to think long about what to do next. You've seen how lies spread online, right? Well, I figured that the truth could spread just as fast, and it would crush Kelly quicker than I could have imagined. I sent the video first to our mutual friends, those same people who had been trashing me just yesterday, buying into her act. I sent it via messages, private chats, everywhere I could, and guess what? The reaction was immediate. Within a couple of hours, as the video started circulating, the internet literally blew up. People who had been running around with her story like it was sacred scripture started seeing her for who she really was, and man, it was glorious. Comments started pouring in like an avalanche. Did she seriously say that? I always thought something was off. What a bitch. People started sharing the video and it went viral, first among our circle, then further, reaching groups and forums. Kelly, of course, was in total shock. You should have seen her face when she tried to respond to all the questions people were suddenly throwing at her. Her social media accounts were flooded with hate. The very people who had been cheering for her were now tearing her apart. And honestly, I felt a bit of schadenfreude watching it all unfold, you know? Seeing all her followers suddenly turn on her, calling her out for her lies. She tried to defend herself, but each of her attempts only made things worse. People didn't believe her anymore. One by one, posts exposing her lies started popping up, and soon, the local media picked up the story. Kelly could no longer control the flood of truth crashing down on her like an ice-cold shower, but I didn't stop there. Remember how she said, women are always believed, especially when they're victims? Well, I decided to hit her where it hurt the most. I contacted a lawyer and started preparing a lawsuit for false accusations and emotional distress. All the anger I'd been holding inside was about to be unleashed, and Kelly was going to feel the full weight of what she'd done. Going to court was no longer a question of if, but when. In the meantime, I enjoyed watching her public downfall, as every piece of her carefully constructed web of lies crumbled before everyone's eyes. Now, if you think that was the end for Kelly, you're wrong. This was only the beginning of her personal apocalypse. Once the video went viral, her whole life started collapsing so fast, I could barely keep up with all the details. At first, I thought she might find a way to wriggle out of it, maybe spin another lie or find some knight in shining armor to defend her. But no, man, her ship sank faster than the Titanic. The first to abandon her were those who once considered her a friend. Remember all those people who stood up for her? The ones who called me a monster and an abuser? They suddenly went silent. No one wanted to be associated with Kelly once the truth came out. Everyone started distancing themselves, and some even publicly apologized to me for believing her nonsense. But you know what was the sweetest part? Even those who silently supported her and laughed on the sidelines when she tried to destroy me vanished. Zero support. Complete isolation. Then came the big one. Her new boyfriend, the rich idiot she had replaced me with, dumped her as soon as he realized what she'd dragged him into. I'm sure that after watching that video he understood. If she did this to me, it was only a matter of time before she'd do the same to him. No man wants to be with a woman capable of such manipulations. And of course, public opinion played a huge role. He bailed so fast, I bet she didn't even have time to pack her stuff. The luxurious life she was trying to build for herself burst like a soap bubble. She tried to defend herself, posting things like, "I was misunderstood. This was taken out of context. And I didn't mean to cause so much harm," but no one bought it. She was already doomed. And then, the cherry on top, she got fired from her job. Yup. Her boss didn't want to be associated with that kind of disgrace. Imagine what a blow that was for her. She always took pride in her career, thought of herself as some kind of important figure, and then, bam, it all came crashing down. No one wanted to work with someone who could destroy another person's life with the snap of a finger. Her social life was in ruins, her career destroyed, and the most important part, everyone who had supported her lies now saw her as toxic. Her name became synonymous with deceit and manipulation. It was the end not only of her reputation, but of her entire life. She was left alone, with no friends, no money, and no future. And me? I was enjoying the show. I'm not going to lie. I've never been a vengeful person. But seeing everything she built on lies fall apart was incredibly satisfying. It wasn't just moral satisfaction. It was a kind of justice she had earned. But you know what's the craziest part? She even tried to contact me again. Imagine that, after everything. She wrote to me, saying we needed to talk, and that she needed help. Help? Seriously, did she think I was stupid? Of course. I ignored her message. There was no place for her in my life anymore. Her time was up. And as for me, I was already gearing up for the next step. The lawsuit against Kelly for false accusations was on the horizon, and I was ready to finish her off for good. When it all finally came to an end, her exposure, the collapse of her career and social life, I felt an incredible weight lift off my shoulders. You see, when someone tries to completely destroy your life, it's like a never-ending cycle. You're always on edge, always waiting for the next blow. But after her public downfall, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe freely. But that wasn't the end of it. Like I said, I wasn't going to let her actions go unpunished. And so, the trial for my lawsuit for false accusations and emotional distress began. Yeah, you heard that right. I wasn't just out to expose her. I was after compensation for all the damage she'd caused. The court case went exactly as I expected. Her lawyer mumbled something about how she didn't think it would go this far, and the judge looked at her like she was trash that had blown into his courtroom by accident. And I had the video, the same one where she confessed everything. That was my ace. When we played it in court, I saw her shrink in her seat. Even the judge's eyebrow twitched. He clearly hadn't expected such a blunt confession. Long story short, she didn't stand a chance. She was ordered to pay compensation for the false accusations and cover my legal fees. That was the final nail in the coffin of her reputation and life. When it was all over, I realized I could finally start over. Sure, her accusations and the whole circus had thrown my life off track for a long time, but now it was all behind me. My reputation was restored. The court was on my side, and her life was ruined. I got back to normal, found a new job, and slowly mended relationships with people who, thankfully, realized they had been duped. Of course, there were some people I could never forgive, but honestly, I didn't really care anymore. As for Kelly, she disappeared. After her story spread across the country, she was nowhere to be found, moved away, changed her name. Who knows where she is now? And honestly, I couldn't care less. Her life is her problem now. I wasn't going to waste another second of my time on her, or the mess she created. And that's how, man, I started living again. Free, without the constant fear of someone stabbing me in the back or having to defend myself in front of friends again. I rebuilt everything she tried to take from me. And most importantly, I got my life back. And Kelly, she's just a bad memory from the distant past. Her game is over. And honestly, I'm even a little glad that everything happened the way it did. Yeah, it was a nightmare. But I came out of it stronger and smarter. Now I know, if someone betrays you, it's better to break their plans into pieces right away, or at the very least, record everything on camera, like I did.